So hello and welcome, I'm Frederick Dunn and this is The Way to Be. So I'm setting up a hive stand here with the license stands because they're adjustable to uneven ground. And what am I going to put on it? A new hive for me here at The Way to Be. It is going to be a top bar hive. So this is where I'm siting it. I'm putting it with my other horizontal hive formats here, the Lands and the Long Langstroth. This is how it comes. Now I got this from Nathalie B at Be Mindful, and you can go to their website. I'll leave a link for that down in the video description. It comes just like this. It's actually pretty simple. It's not as big of a mess as it looks like here. You open it up and look, it's pretty much put together. Now a top bar hive is just that, top bars and a hive, a body to put your bees in. And it's horizontal, so it has all the traits that horizontal hives have. No lifting other than putting the hive in place. And this one comes with hardware. So there is a little bit of hardware to put together, and they include legs if you need them, which would probably work really well if you're on level ground. I'm not. There are clamps here so that we can close the lid. There are wires here that'll hold the lid while it's in its open position. They give you all the screws, and I'm pretty impressed by that. This is built by Amish people, by the way, and the lumber is nice and thick. These are the legs, look at that, with the angles pre-cut. I'm not going to use those, as I showed you already. We're using the license stand. This one has cover boards and, of course, a crown board down the center. I'm going to put it together. Not only that, we're going to put bees in it, because I lucked out. I know, it seems weird. Anyway, this is how it sits on the license stand, and I'm going to change this up because the license stands use 2x4s. You can make them any length you want. The hive is 48 inches. The roof is 50 inches long. Look, I put thwarts here. And I used heavy screws to screw those to the 2x4s, and then I'm going to rest the hive directly on top of those, and I'm going to make this thing 100% storm-proof. So you can see the way it's made. Very simple, by the way. 1.5 by 10 lumber, 4 feet long, and it has holes at either end, which means you can use this for a double colony hive. So here it is from the end. Now I let it overlap a little bit, and they came already, of course, screwed together. I couldn't tell if they glued it up or not, but I'm told that screws probably are enough. The other thing is, I'm not going to put a finish on this beehive. If I were going to, I would do that now, before I finished everything, before I put it all together. In fact, before I mounted it to those thwarts, I would paint it if that's what I was doing, but I'm going to leave it bare. And this is the bottom. That's right, I ran screws right through the thick bottom board and into those 2x4 thwarts. So, you can't move it. And the good news is you don't need to move it, because it's a horizontal hive, and once it's in position, this is not for migratory beekeeping or anything like that. This is to keep it right there. I'm just showing you the website. They have a PDF. You can download all the plans and prints for absolutely for free, and you can build your own. A lot of you probably will. You know why this is really easy. That's Nathalie B right there. And if you haven't seen my interview with her, please look down in the video description and you will see a link there to the YouTube. There's a lot going on down there in Texas. So less is more. That's Les Crowder, of course, who partners up with Nathalie B in designing these hives and teaching the world about horizontal hive beekeeping in probably the least expensive and least skill challenging hive you could put together. Because look at this. There's no frames. There's no Langstroth or Lands frames or any specific frames that you have to go to a specific manufacturer for. These are all the parts. You can freeze frame this and look at that, or just download it, as I did, from the website at Be Mindful. Anyway, as I was mentioning, the frames, it's just a top board. That's the term, top bar hive. And they included hinges. What for? Well, we want to open the lid. And the lid is interesting too, because it doesn't completely enclose the area where the top bars are. They included self-tapping screws. I like that a lot, and this is, of course, the star screwdriver that you use the bit for. So that didn't come with it. You have to have your own, but there's the screws, nice and heavy duty, and that is to put these things together and get those hinges on. And look, the hinges are on the ends. And then there are gable struts in the center, which only screw to the roof boards by themselves. The screws that have those little padded washers on them, that goes to the wire that holds your roof when it's in the open position. These are the heavy duty screws all weather capable. And those are for, of course, what would be your legs to support it. Look at the big gap down the middle here. This is 3/4 inch stock here. And it runs the length. These boards are 5 feet long, 3/4 inches thick, and I screwed them right through to those gabled ends. And then, of course, the crown board I screwed through also to the gabled ends, and then the middle support. And then look at the air gap here. You just stick your top boards in there, and the top boards, in fact, are nice and thick too, and you turn them up on end. Pretty interesting there. You notice it's not a perfectly snug fit, and that's perfectly fine because the bees are going to propolize this stuff up on their own. And I'm going to have to put bees in it. This is my wife helping line up the top bars, and there are shims that come with it. And so she likes it. I like it too. We're going to have fun watching it weather, I think, through the years. Those are the shims, little thin pieces there. Why do you need that? Because when you line everything up, there may be a little odd space here at the end that doesn't take a full top bar. So the shims can be put in there to have everything hold its place. And I'm going to change that a little later on in this video too, because I'm going to put in another follower board. It comes with one. I had to make another one, because if you want to put 2 colonies in this thing, you're going to need 2 follower boards. So this is it all together. There's the wire in place, and I have it tilted slightly beyond the vertical so that it won't just flip back shut. And then there are the clamps here that'll hold it still even in a heavy wind. So there you go, hardware completely supplied, easy to use, and there's 1 follower board in place. We're going to change that. And we want to put something on these. Now if you notice, these top bars are smooth on 3 sides, and 1 side is rough cut. That's the side that you want to face the interior of your hive. Why? Because we want them to propolize it, because a propolized hive is sealed up against moisture, and it's also a health benefit to your bees. Now I just happen to have a bunch of honeycomb around made by bees, and we're going to heat that up, and I'm going to stick it onto my top bars just as starter strips. I don't want these bees just making comb all over the place as if it were one continuous interior surface, which they certainly would. So we have to get them lined up somehow. So I'm using this heat gun. I'm just going to heat up the wood a little bit and the bottom edge of the beeswax, and I'm going to stick it on there with beeswax. That's it. It's an experiment. We're just going to see what's going to happen. It can't go wrong. It's just a way to find out how the bees will use the space and how they rearrange that beeswax. They can chew it and repurpose it all they want. And I'm going to start with 6 frames on this one because I'm going to have a small colony at one end. And this, as far as the bees are concerned, is the only space. Now, Swarm Commander. I'm going to put that there because I want a swarm to occupy it. Swarm Commander is the most effective way to get scouts for swarms interested in your hive. And there it is. Now that pretty soon is going to look the same color as that shed, and it can last a long time without treatment. When I asked Nathalie B about her favorite treatment, she said untreated, unpainted. And of course I want you to get your cup of coffee or tea or something hot to drink, because I want you to be able to sit and stare at it for a long time. Because what am I going to do? I'm going to install bees. Now the way I install honeybees, I find them in a swarm state. Sometimes I collect them on a stick through pheromones, and I let them walk in. And so I just want the bees to choose it on their own. Look at the 2 holes there, and there are 2 holes at the other end also. So we've closed it off. If you can recall, we have the space of 6 top bars there at the right, and that's where I'm going to put my bees in. Here they are, magically on a tree that gets swarms frequently. Now this is a tiny swarm. There is a queen in here, and but it's not a prime swarm. This is, what's today, June the 12th. And so these bees going in here, they are not needing to take up a lot of space, so I just need them to get things started. This is the stick after I shook the bees off into my butterfly net, and of course I squirted them with sugar syrup to get them going. And then we're going to see if they'll just walk in. And it is important, in my opinion, to let the bees choose the space. If they don't go in on their own, then there's a good chance they could abscond. And I'm going to go back on my word on this later in this video, because I'm going to tease another swarm into the other end, and they don't like the hive. They don't go in right away. So I'm going to show you also how to get bees to go in when they're hesitant to do so. But these right here, easy going. And what you're looking at here is a sequence when I installed them, which was actually 2 days ago. So as I mentioned, today is June the 12th. But 2 days ago, we installed these, and after we had put the hive together, it smells like fresh cut lumber, so we have to do things to get them to want to go in. That's why I spritzed it a little bit with Swarm Commander. So you're probably wondering, well, did they go in? Let me just tell you ahead of time, if you don't want to watch this whole video, they did go in. It worked. And for the rest of the video, I'm going to show you how they do. We're going to watch them because I like to get eyes on the queen. I didn't see her. But the fact that they're still in there 2 days later tells me the queen is present. And here they are, fanning their Nasonov glands. They've decided the space is worth moving into. Remember, we've encouraged them with Swarm Commander as a lure. And they do walk right in. This is the reason why you want a chair to sit in. You want to sit and enjoy them and watch your bees going in. If we didn't have this happen, there are methods for installing bees from a Langstroth nucleus hive, for example. Nathalie B has that on their website, and it's just a nucleus box that they bolt to the end of this hive, and then they have a common hole and the bees migrate in eventually. I much prefer to install a swarm, and this time of year, June, a swarm in June is worth a silver spoon. And I should probably point out that we're located in the northeastern part of the United States, the state of Pennsylvania, and the northwest corner of the state of Pennsylvania. So this hive needs to get with it because they need to start preparing for winter now. I consider June kind of the last month to really start a colony that's going to be able to handle things on their own and be prepared for our long winters ahead. And this does seem to be quite a few more bees than were hanging on that stick, and this frequently happens. What's happening while they're going in, if you look at all those social influencers with their abdomens in the air, they're fanning their Nasonov gland, they're advertising this location for their own bees, of course. But wouldn't you know it, that bees that are just flying through the area continue to join and increase their numbers. So this is not the tiny little cluster that was hanging on that tree branch. This is many more bees because the volunteers just keep showing up. So I guess they're casting their vote to move into a top bar hive. Now you might be wondering too, how much does a hive like this cost? Well, if you're building it yourself, it's whatever the current lumber rates are. But if you need to have one of these built and shipped to you and you want to get it just the way this one was sent to me, then it's $370 at the time that I produce this video, and that includes shipping. If you can go to Texas and go pick one up in person, it's less than $200, so not bad at all. But I think if you know somebody with some basic carpenter skills, you can put this together. And remember, you don't have to worry about compatibility. So, it's one of the things I don't like about having a bunch of different styles of hives. If I need to share resources between hives, then I have to have matching frames. And so the Langstroth is probably the most popular, most readily available frame in all the different sizes and foundations and everything else. But here, what do we need? A top bar. Top bar only. So once you get those going, if you've got some 2x stock laying around, you can add more top bars at any time. So we're just showing the bees going in. And of course, making a choice. I did spray them with sugar syrup. That's why some of them look a little bit wet. And that adds weight to them. So when I squirt a bunch of bees on a stick, on a branch, whatever they are, and I shake them into my net, it just helps them stay together a little better. Someone asked recently if I add Honey Bee Healthy to my sugar syrup that's in my sprayer, and I do. So I put 1 teaspoon of Honey Bee Healthy in a quart of 1-to-1 sugar syrup. That's what I use when I'm bagging bees from branches, if I'm going to shake them off. And they're probably really not that hungry because they have left a hive somewhere. And guess what? When they leave the hive, they fill themselves up. So they're good for several days. Now, this particular swarm was not hanging on that stick for more than a day. So they're still fresh. Look at their abdomens, nice and full. They're pretty vigorous. They're ready to go. It is in the 70s right now as these are going in. And as I mentioned before, once these go in, I'm thinking I might as well close it off and make myself another follower board and turn this into a 2-colony hive and have one at either end. Now, if one of those happens to outproduce the other, or if one of them loses a queen and becomes queenless or something like that, guess what? You just remove the middle follower board, scoot those top bars over, and combine the colonies. It's pretty darn simple. The holes are already there. I was also going to try something else out here. I was going to put a ultraviolet entrance cover on that entrance to the left and see if I could invite scouts to come and visit easier. But I want you to look at this hive. Of course, this bee wanted to land on my leg for a minute. But they stuck around. They moved in. They're there. They're good. Look at the airspace above the top bars. It's just wide open. Thank you for that to the rooster. That's a Menorcan rooster, if you want to know. By the way, we have free-ranging chickens everywhere. No, they do not eat the bees. They won't even eat dead bees, but they certainly eat lots of other bugs. And we haven't had any wax moths this year either, so that's pretty interesting too. Even though we had some dead outs, they did not move in on them. So here we are. They're just moving in. They will go to work right away. They started doing orientation flights right away. What's an orientation flight look like? Well, the bees that have decided that this is where they're going to live, they turn around, come right back out while there's daylight, and they start corkscrewing into the air and searching for resources. Now, that is my follower board that I made, and this is going to provide me with a second space. So remember that for your bees, as far as they know, the entire hive is whatever you tell them it is with your follower board. So once I put that in, of course, I had to pull those little thin shims out, and I ended up with just one thin shim. So I did full top bars, starting at the end of the hive, all the way up to this follower board. See that? And then I added in the shim beyond it. What did I do? Took these boards inside, heated them up, put comb on them, so my bees would be kind of hinted in the right direction towards what they're going to turn their own frames into. And of course there's propolis. I need to drop some of that in there because propolis is appealing to scout bees, and I want the bees to scout out this cavity and move in without me. And so I put those together. 6 top bars at that end also. And I expanded the other one over here to 8 because I decided I wanted more space. So these bees are kicking away. This was a day later, by the way. So they've had one overnight in there, pretty conclusive. And then look what I see here. This is in slow motion, I understand. Look at that swarm of bees. Those are my bees, by the way. That's one of my favorite queens in the middle of all of that. And if you think I'm going to let them get away, you've got another thing coming. So I just happen to have a new hive to put them in. What kind of hive is it? It's a top bar hive from Be Mindful. And so I'm going to spritz them with sugar syrup. I'm going to shake them into another butterfly net. This one's not fabric, it's the open mesh type. And look, when I saw how big that swarm was, I added more top bars. That's the beauty of a horizontal hive. You need more frames? Add more frames. If you need top bars and more space in a top bar hive, you're just adding more top bars. Very easy. Look at this bag of bees. Now I'm going to want these to go in there, right? So do you think they'll just walk right in? Now there's my ultraviolet blue entry disc that I don't need anymore because I'm installing a swarm. I'm not counting on scouts to find it. Look at all the bees in here. Now with this kind of a mesh, there's no overheating problem. They do have to follow the mesh. I did notice they were kind of trying to just push through the side of it in some places instead of following it as they do with the solid fabric, the cotton fabric that I used before. I wanted to go into the space. I wanted to walk right through that hole. And you know what they're doing? They're not going in. So this can be a point of frustration. I don't know if you've had this happen to you. Some beekeepers like to just open the top and shake them in. We could do that. We could tilt the lid over. We could pull some frames, some top bars off, and shake some bees in there as an encouragement to the rest of the bees. But remember, I like them to walk in on their own. Let me know, by the way, if you spot the queen in here. She's in here somewhere. She's really dark, by the way, a dark banded queen. And what hive do they come out of? Well, I have 3 observation hives in a building not too far from this particular hive. And the problem is, observation hives are very limited in space, and what do? The bee numbers build up, and they just turn into swarm machines, particularly this time of year. Historically, these hives also swarm in August again, and sometimes late as September. So those require special attention. This one's got a lot of time ahead, and with this number of bees, we're going to be doing a lot of fun things with this top bar hive because they are ready to draw comb. So these are my own bees that flew to a tree for their bivouac location, maybe 50 feet from the building that they were living in. I shook them off of that into my net, brought the net over, stuck it right here, and what are the bees doing? They went into the entrance all right, and then they just clustered up and stopped the other bees in the swarm from going into the hive. Now this is frustrating. You were sitting here watching this, and you've got your own bees, and you're trying to get them to walk into a hive the way I do it, and they just don't go in, and it can be worse than that. You go and get some lunch, or you eat supper, whatever you do, and you come back, not only do they not go in, but they're all gone. It gets a little anxious here because I don't want to lose these bees. These are mine. I have a really good history with these bees. And I don't want them to go anywhere else. I want them to go into my hive. So what can we do? I'm trying to think of ways to manipulate them. What do they respond to most of all? Pheromones. So while I'm thinking about this, if there were only a way to install a pheromone in this hive that would draw them in. Now remember, on the other end of the same hive, we got those in with some Swarm Commander, which comes from the Blythewood Bee Company, by the way. If you're looking for it, you can get it on Amazon, wherever. I'm going to try something different on this one, and I'm going to show you how it works. They're settled in. I was a little concerned that if their queen was weak or something like that, they would just come out and drift right over and join the bees on the other end, but these bees aren't going in. So that's a problem. It's a problem if you're making a video about a top bar hive and you want bees to be inside of it so they can do their thing. And I'm going to get them in. Watch. Now why is the hole open now? It's not congested anymore because I squirted it with sugar syrup. That did not work. They just moved out of the way and avoided the sugar syrup with Honeybee Healthy in it. So I have to come up with something else. And I'm thinking, they're top bars. The top bars are completely accessible. Like, I don't have to pull this whole hive apart to get to some of the top bars. So I'm going to pull the very farthest in top bar right up against my follower board. What am I going to do? I'm going to rub it with a really old QMP noodle. Look at that, Queen Mandibular Pheromone. I'm not going to leave the noodle in there. I'm just going to put enough of it on there to give it a trace of a queen, because we don't want to compete with the existing queen in that swarm. And then I'm going to flip it over, rough side down, put it inside. You know what? Outsmarting bees in a swarm is very satisfying if they do what we want them to do. So now I've done that. Now it is the farthest top bar in. I think I put 10 on here. And I need bees to go in. I need them to check it out. Smell the smells, look at things, check out the comb that I attach to the underside of these top bars. I need them to approve and tell the rest of the swarm to approve. Better line these up because you know what? They're going to glue this down with propolis. It's not going to be that easy to move it later. I need them to smell it. I need them to approve and go in. I need them to bring all of their other swarm mates because this is a lot of bees. And I want to see the comb that they're going to draw down. This is a fun hive to play with. If I need to make another one, it's very easy to copy the one that's right here. And if I didn't mention it already, 1.5 by 10 inch stock, 4 feet long, 5-foot roof, or 50-inch roof, not a 5-foot roof, sorry about that. Anyway, they are scattered and moving around, plus a bunch of them are in the air, which does not give me a lot of comfort. They could abscond completely. They could all bail out of this net and just fly away. If I'm looking for waggle dances, I want to make sure they're not trying to tell each other to go somewhere else. this hive is the only place I need them to be. So if I could just get a couple of them in there to smell that pheromone and come back and tell the others, hey, smells good, let's go in here. We get a couple zipping through the entrance. This is where it starts to look promising. Don't relax yet. It can still go bad. They can leave. You can have a hive without 2 colonies. Now I'm on extra credit here anyway. We have a colony inside the opposite end, but it's a tiny one. We would be waiting a long time. By the way, this is not set up for feeding your bees. So now I remember in the interview that I did with Nathalie that she was working on a frame-sized feeder for the top bar hives that they sell, but it wasn't yet ready for the market. Oh look, somebody got the word. This is what you live for, what you want to see. The bees volunteering to go in after we've influenced them with pheromones. Now the QMP, I want to talk about that a little bit. Queen mandibular pheromone, it's sold, it better be called temp queen. It can be used as a swarm lure, but you should not leave it in there. It really is designed to make the bees think there is a queen present inside the hive. That's why I felt it would be okay if I just rubbed a little bit of it on the wood and did not leave that full temp queen noodle in there, because once they all go in and their queen goes in, then they'll realize too late that they were duped, and since the queen actually went in, then they'll all be okay with it, and they'll stay there, and they'll live the whole rest of the year inside the hive making comb, so that we can make follow-up videos and show you how the comb gets produced. Now we did rush this together because I didn't anticipate a large swarm like this. So remember, I do have some top bars in there that are not primed with beeswax. So I did today pull those frames out, and I did drip wax onto them just to try to encourage the bees to keep their comb nice and even, because I do know that some people have problems with top bar hives because they may not have definite spacing for the comb, and then you can get a lot of cross combing, or they can run it in the wrong direction entirely. But we're going to deal with whatever happens. At the very least, we're going to have a cool hive, and for those of you who have been writing to me and suggesting to me that I try out top bar hives, here it is. So now we'll have one. Maybe I'll add another one. I don't know. But we'll have 2 colonies in one hive, so the sharing thing between the 2 is right there, easy to do. And as I mentioned before, whichever one outperforms the other, or if one of them ends up queenless, for example, I can swap resources right here in the same thing, or I can push their top bars together and combine them. So, pretty straightforward. If you see the queen, by the way, please put a timestamp down in the comment section where you saw her and at what time. That big fat bee slightly to the left there is a drone, not the queen. Drones are frequently pointed out as queens. And the drones are just along for the ride. They are swept up when swarms happen. And by the way, the observation hive that they departed from is also doing fantastic. Has full frames of capped brood. They are going to recover really fast. So I'm not at all worried about them. So we fast forward a little bit here, and they're mostly out of the net, and they are mostly inside the hive. The interesting part too is we're installing this. This is like 7:30 at night. So this was late in the day. I wanted to get them out of the net so they'd be buttoned up and I could get the net away from the hive before the overnight hit. Nice hot day today, as I mentioned, June 12th, 2025. I also have this ultraviolet entrance disc. I'm going to take that off of there because I don't need that anymore. It was just an experiment to see if I could get scouts interested. Because I found a swarm, I didn't need scouts, didn't need that waiting game. And they all moved in and went straight to work. So the following day, so this was June the 11th, and then I follow up, and today's June the 12th. They were already out doing orientation flights and scouting out resources, doing their corkscrew flights high up into the air. Now this vicinity is not new to them. remember, they just came out of a hive that's right nearby. Does that mean that some of these foragers could drift right back to their original hive? They sure could. And I have to tell you, I wouldn't mind if they did, because this is almost too many bees for the space that I've provided them. So we're just going to see what happens. We're going to take it as it comes. We're not going to try to feed them or anything else. Again, as I mentioned before, I don't have a means of providing food and resources for them. So you could go to their website, Nathalie B, Be Mindful, and you can look up things like the Flex-Horizontal Top Bar Hive, which is what this is, and Les Crowder, less is more. He has partnered with Nathalie, and they put the word out. They're also treatment-free beekeepers, so they have an entirely holistic approach to beekeeping, and they feel that this is probably the most holistic approach to housing your bees. And so I can't say I'm unhappy with it. It was really interesting talking to Nathalie that they came up with the angles on this top bar hive by looking at the angles of the actual hexagonal cells that the bees make themselves. And so that was interesting to me, because they just copied an angle that the bees were already familiar with, and based on what I've seen and learned and heard from others, the comb that they build off the top bars doesn't get braced against the interior sidewalls of your hive. It also comes all the way down to the bottom within bee space, which is 3/8 of an inch. And then so they leave space for them to migrate around. Now when it comes time to harvest your honey from these things, you're going to be cutting the comb off your top bars, and you're going to do a crush and strain method. That's pretty much your only option. You can also do cut comb, which is pretty fancy for people. You can, once the comb is finished and the honey is capped, you can cut sections out, drop it into a quart jar, and then pour honey around it. And some people like that. So you can show people kind of the magic of beekeeping, and there are some special handling considerations which have been very well covered by lots of other YouTubers, influencers, and bee educators. So there's no shortage of information on the Top Bar Hive. So I think people just wanted to know what I would think of it, how I would manage it, maybe even which variety I would choose. So I like this one. Of course, I was won over by Nathalie. I ran into her in Austin, Texas, and I was at the Texas State Beekeepers Association annual meeting, and that's where I got to learn a little bit about her and the program, and she got her Master Beekeeping certificate from Texas A&M. So, what do you think? Do you think 10 top bars is enough? And again, horizontal hive, we will be able to expand it. If they start to use up all the frames, we'll just take the follower board out and move it over. So this was this morning, very early, 59 degrees Fahrenheit, by the way. Both colonies still present. So the interesting part about these over here at the end is I expected to see a flurry of activity, but there wasn't. They're holding tight inside, they're hanging out. And later on, as things warmed up, they started scouting out. So what do you think? We're going to watch it. If you're not already a subscriber, I invite you to subscribe, because I'm going to update my experience with this Top Bar Hive. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend ahead. Tomorrow is Friday the 13th.